Okay. We'll go back to where I was at.
All right, bear with me a moment. Recording. Okay, good.
It's fine now.
All right. Grandma must have hers on because I see the ceiling.
Dina, you're not supposed to say that. I told you to turn that off. Dina!
I don't think people want us to see the ceiling.
Or me.
Okay, so I'm going to wait a couple minutes. I got in here in the room a little bit early, but I'm going to wait a couple minutes for people to join us. And then we'll be beginning with our study. And I just started recording just as an update for last week. Last week, we did a teaching on compassion. Unfortunately, I forgot to hit the record button. So that means I'm going to have to record that teaching again. I'm going to try to do it this weekend. So if you do not see it on Facebook Live or on YouTube, it's because I forgot to hit the record button. So
He's already getting senile. Okay, maybe Jody Barb.
So I'm going to try to get it recorded this weekend. I'm going to try to record compassion and upload it to Facebook Live. Fortunately, all of these classes, as far as Mussar goes, all these classes are interconnected, but they're not in any sort of defined order. So you can come back and watch the compassion video a little bit later, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna wait for a couple more minutes, see if anybody else joins us. Sarah, are you logging in? You gonna log in? Why not?
What's she see?
Because I'm right here.
So you might have thoughts you want to share with us.
I'm still right here.
Oh, okay. And Grandma's not going to record her face?
No, I'm not, am I? Because I don't trust her.
No, you're good.
You are so mean.
No.
You know what I need to figure out how to do?
I know you too well.
That
I can figure out.
until we start the class and officially start the class, I need to be able to play some background music or something.
You can do that on your computer.
Just screen record me. No, you can record, but Sarah and I can sing.
No.
Okay, so there is
Do you
also
want to do that?
what's that?
Do you want to do that?
Do what?
The background music.
I do.
Well, then I can show you.
How do you do? I haven't been able to figure out how to do the background for it.
Make sure you get good
Background music?
Christian
Like music, the sound, or the vision of.
Both. Eventually, I want to do the background sound, but for now, let's do the background.
Well, I can show you how to
Vision.
do. I know how to do the sound. I'm just not sure how to do. Let's see. There. Trying to go to where I just was.
Chris, why don't you come in here and sit in the chair?
It's right over here, right on the bottom. You here, click off of it somewhere.
What?
Here, let me show you here.
Did you put some in the refrigerator?
Is it down here?
Yes, hit more.
Are they?
Let me see.
They'd be cold in the car too.
Oops,
Under meeting settings?
maybe.
I don't know what he's doing, but she keeps saying, Preston. He's pounding something.
In gallery? No.
Play join. There has to be a way.
Yeah, I know there is. I can't figure it out.
Well, let's see. What am I doing wrong?
There.
Okay, cool. Not, dude.
Scroll anywhere in there and click it. All right, there you
Okay,
go.
cool. Share maybe? Photo?
Oh, I think that's actually sharing my screen to everybody else.
Oh.
Like if I want to share a.
Well, I'll hit allow.
Should have said, you can take your teeth out and you can toss this.
Let me see it.
So you don't go to school at all tomorrow? Oh,
Chat.
I'll have to change your day for you.
YouTube.
We had trash tonight.
Here,
too.
maybe it. It's right. Oh no. I'm trying to get to there. Cool. No. See, I couldn't even. I don't know. Hold on. Yeah, I couldn't even figure out how to do it on wait. On Teams. Why would you eat that? No.
Huh.
Wait. Okay, so it's not there.
I wonder if it's a Chromebook thing where it's not letting me do it. Oh, well, we'll figure it out later. That's all right. I want to go ahead and get started here in just a moment. Okay, so we're trying to figure out how to change the background settings, and
And if
we're
anybody
having
wants
some
help,
difficulties here.
text Jimmy. I bet Jonathan would know how. Since he does that for a living.
All right. Okay, it is 6:32, so I am going to get started. It looks like there's just 4 of us here in the room, and there's a couple people online. So anybody who wants to join us online through the Zoom site can join us. Otherwise, watch it on Facebook Live. All right, so what we're talking about this evening is humility. Humility is one of the midot, or it is one of the midot of Mussar. So when we think about humility, okay, actually, let me start off. I want to start off with the Hasidic story. Okay, a Hasidic story about a man who comes to the local tzaddik. The local tzaddik is what we would think of as kind of in the Jewish community as kind of a righteous holy man. He's a spiritual giant, if you would. Okay, so this young man comes to the tzaddik with a complaint, and the young man says to the tzaddik, he says, "All my life, I have tried to follow the advice of the rabbis, that the one who runs away from fame will find that fame pursues him." Excuse me. And then the man continues. He says, "While I run away from fame, fame never seems to pursue me. Why is that?" And the tzaddik said to him, "The trouble is that while you do run away from fame, you are always looking over your shoulder to see if fame is chasing after you." Okay, in other words, what the tzaddik is saying is that you totally missed the point. You're trying to, you're showing false humility because you act like you're running away from fame or popularity or notoriety, when in reality, you're looking over your shoulder to see if it really is following you. And what the tzaddik is saying is that only when you truly humble yourself, only when you truly practice humility does fame follow you. But if you're looking for it, you will never find it. Okay. So what is the biblical view of humility? Okay, I'm going to use several Jewish references here, but what is the biblical view of humility? The Hebrew term for humility is anavah. It translates as roughly as gentleness, meekness, modesty. Okay, so when we think of humility, okay, what comes to mind for you guys? What do you think of when you think of humility or being humble? Anything to come to mind?
I'm thinking, Sarah, do you? What's it to be humble?
I don't know.
I know what it means, but I can't put it in words.
Okay.
Like balance. I don't know.
Okay. Actually, Sarah, that's really good. That's a really good thought. I'm glad you said that, balance, because we're going to look at that in just a moment, because that actually has something to play in it. Okay. So humility, when we think of humility, a rough definition, like I said, is like gentleness, meekness, modesty. Alan Moranis, who wrote the book, I shared it with you all last week, but I will have to share that a little bit later. Hi, Ray. Good to see you, my friend. I will have to share this book. Yeah, I was just telling everybody, Ray was on here last week, that I forgot to hit the record button for Compassion last week. So I'm going to have to record it again this weekend and then upload it to Facebook Live. This week we're talking about humility. And Alan Moranis, who wrote the book Everyday Holiness, it's a very important study guide when we're studying Mussar. He says this, he defines humility as this. He says, humility is essentially occupying our proper space, neither too much nor too little. And I think this is a good definition, although I think we're going to have an even better definition a little bit later. But for now, I think that is a good definition, occupying your proper space, not too much nor too little. This makes sense on multitudes of levels. We will break down this definition as we walk through this class this evening. The Master, Yeshua, Jesus, when he starts the Sermon on the Mount, when he begins to begins to teach, and what we think of as the Sermon on the Mount, he starts with this statement. He says this: "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom." Okay, think about that for a moment. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. Okay, there's two gospel traditions that record the Sermon on the Mount. One says, blessed is the poor in spirit. The other one says, blessed are the poor. Which one is it? Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because I think it's saying the same thing. So when we think of blessed are the poor in spirit, a good way of translating that would be humble. Okay, so you could essentially translate Yeshua's words with the Sermon on the Mount as blessed are the humble, for theirs is the kingdom of God. So it is Rabbi Bakia Ibn Pakuda teaches that all virtues and all duties depend and start with humility. Okay, and this seems to line up with the teachings of Yeshua, because he himself started off the Sermon on the Mount when he began to proclaim a radical message of the kingdom of God upon the earth, and how it manifests in our lives, in our ethical attitudes and behaviors. And he starts it off with that same idea, with humility. Okay, the poor in spirit may or may not be men of wealth, but they, whether or not they're wealthy, they conduct themselves with a humble spirit. So that's what he's talking about when he shares in spirit. He says they are the humble in spirit. So it really doesn't have to do as much with money or one's personal wealth as much as one's attitude. So you can be humble. You could be humble in spirit and be very, very wealthy. Remember the principle of reversal that is taught by Yeshua. Again, I'm going to throw a plug out. For those who have not had a chance to read it, I would encourage you to read Rabbi Russ Resnick's book, Divine Reversal. Very, very powerful book. He kind of touches on this. But remember Yeshua's teaching here: whoever exalts himself will be what? Humbled. And whoever humbles himself will be exalted. That's that lesson of reversal. You know, that the least shall be the greatest and the greatest shall be the least, or the least. I'm paraphrasing. I think I got that paraphrase a little backwards, but you get the point. Okay. The problem we come across in our modern understanding of humility is that humility sounds a lot like humiliation. Okay. Humility sounds like humiliation. And I think oftentimes within our culture, we get those things confused. We think humility is linked to this idea of humiliation. It's easy to get the wrong impression of the biblical concept of humility if we have in mind this idea of humiliation. The Jewish understanding of humility has little to do with being the lowest or the most self-deprecating person. It has nothing to do with thinking of yourself as lowly. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. It has and we're going to talk about that. I don't want to give it away yet. We're going to talk about that in just a moment and what it means. Humility, excuse me, biblical humility is not about how low you think. Okay, I'm going to give you another definition of humility. And I think this is an even better definition than what Marinus gives. This is from Rabbi Avraham Isaac Cook. He says this: humility is associated with spiritual perfection. When humility affects depression, it is defective. When it is genuine, it inspires joy, courage, and inner dignity. So when humility affects depression, it is defective. That's not true humility. That's false humility. But when it is genuine, when we practice genuine humility, it inspires joy and courage and inner dignity. According to Rabbi Beryl Wine, and I think he's absolutely right on, when you think about our modern culture, especially our pop culture today, the loss of humility came through with the threatening anonymity of mass culture and the loss of our neighborhoods and communities and congregations. So, in other words, the further we move away from each other, the less heard we are and the less valuable we see ourselves. Pop culture has emerged out of the various ways of making a statement in hopes that somehow we will be noticed. Because the reality is that we all want to be noticed, right? We all want to be noticed. We all want to feel important. We all want to feel valued. Okay. And oftentimes in our pop culture today, we value the wrong things, and we translate that and transpose that to our children. And our children have grown up with this false idea of humility and the need to get attention, the need to stick out, the need to be able to say, hey, look, somebody pay attention to me, right? We all want to be noticed. We all want to feel important. We all want to have our story heard. One of the most powerful things that I have learned is that, especially when it comes to people who have suffered through depression and anxiety and things like that, because I myself have dealt with some of those things, is that one of the most powerful things that a person can experience in helping change anxiety and reversing anxiety and depression is to have your story told. Okay, everybody wants to have their story told. Everybody wants somebody to listen to them and have their story told. That's perfectly understandable. Okay, we all want to have our story told. However, our entire pop culture has become a cry of, hey, look at me, pay attention to me. I'm important over here, pay attention to me. And it's all done based upon the way we look. It's based upon outer presentation. Okay, the way we look, or the way we sing, or the way we play a sport, or what have you. How many, some of you guys have probably heard that, so I think it's pronounced Salento song, Watch Me Nay Nay.
Oh,
It is one of the most annoying songs I've ever heard in my life. Watch me nay nay. But herein again lies that same attitude, of somebody needs to pay attention to me. This is not necessarily bad. Okay, wanting somebody to pay attention to you is not necessarily bad. In fact, it is a natural part of childhood. It's a natural part of growing up. We all want somebody to pay attention to us. How many of us with our children, if you don't have any children yet, you will experience this. But how many of us have experienced our children, going, Daddy, look at me, pay attention to me, look what I can do, and they want to show you the newest thing they can do, or Mommy, look at what I've done, look at this picture I've drawn. That's very, very, very natural. We all want to be noticed, especially by our parents. We all want to hear those words, I'm proud of you, or you know what, you are very talented. We all want to hear those words. That's very natural. The problem comes in is as we grow up, as we grow older, as we grow up, we need to change our focus. It isn't as much about trying to get attention for ourselves. That is something that oftentimes happens when we are much younger. As we mature, what the heck is that?
That's Sarah's phone.
Then as we grow older, the need for attention should diminish. However, we live in a culture that is unfortunately very immature. And oftentimes we have a culture, especially a younger culture, especially within our pop culture, that has not grown up. And everything is about, look at me, pay attention to me. Look at how I dress. Look at how I act. I'm trying to get attention here.
You turn on YouTube, constantly it's people up there patting themselves on the back, look what I'm doing. That's exactly.
And
what
that
they
is
do.
very true. That is
Yeah.
very true. And like I said, that can be very natural when we're younger. But as we grow older, in a healthy way, in a very healthy way, with proper attitudes, proper behavior, proper self-esteem, then that should diminish. We should no longer be focusing on trying to get attention for ourselves.
If you're insecure, that's when you do it. If you're that
Yes.
insecure, you have to get attention one way or another.
When I think of a lack of self-esteem, oftentimes this leads to harmful habits of feeling worthless. Take, for example, I'm just going to give you an example. We have a teenage girl who is overwhelmed with pop culture's focus on external beauty.
Mhm.
Okay, our culture is focused on external beauty. Maybe she is physically attractive. Maybe she does receive undue attention because of her physical beauty, and because of our culture's need to focus attention on ourselves. She finds her value in her beauty. As according to culture, she finds her value in her beauty, not in her spirit, but in her physical beauty, or in some cases, especially with a lot of men, he finds his value in his physical talents. He finds his value, oftentimes in sports or what have you. The result of this young woman who finds her value in her beauty is that she overextends herself in a very unhealthy way towards the opposite sex, because she desires attention, and she gets it. So she desires attention, so she presents herself in a way that is not the best for her, because she's going to receive the most negative attention. But at this point, all she wants is attention. She has become prideful in her beauty. She knows that she is physically attractive, and she's become prideful in her beauty. And she relies upon that, maybe even manipulating that to control people. But it is all still a result of a lack of self-worth.
Well, that's with these mothers. It brings these girls and puts them in beauty pageants.
Yeah, very, very
That's a
sad.
very
Very sad.
downfall.
It's all the result of the same thing, and that is a lack of self-worth. That this woman does not see her true value in who she is as a person, who she is as a spirit, as a soul. So her value then becomes what pop culture tells her, and that is her external beauty. And of course, those things fade. Those things disappear.
Okay.
We grow older. And if that's what you've put your value on, you're going to try desperately to keep that. You'll do whatever you can, whether it's plastic surgery or what have you, in order to keep that, because that becomes your value. Let me give you another extreme example here. Okay, the opposite side of the popular attractive girl may be the plain Jane. Okay, you've all seen Brady Bunch. You know Jan, right? Okay, of the Brady Bunch, the middle child who was always trying to be noticed because she's the middle child. Well, the plain Jane is not unlike Jan in the Brady Bunch. She is the average girl who doesn't stick out, who needs to stand out from the rest of the crowd to get attention. She's the average girl, but yet she needs to stick out to get attention. She wants people to notice her. Okay, and again, our culture notices the physical attributes. Those things stand out, not the inner soul, not the spirit and the soul of the person. But she needs to get attention. So how is she going to do that? So she expresses herself as a goth or a punk or an emo or a metalhead or a rapper, whatever the case may be. She expresses herself through these subcultures, because how else is she going to get noticed? She can't get noticed if she's just the plain Jane. because that's what we focus our attention on, is those physical attributes. So she tries to stand out. She tries to stand out. Maybe she's got tats up and down her arms. She's dyed her hair black and she wears black eyeliner or what have you. And it's all a part of trying to stand out. And again, it all comes down to the same thing. It's an expression of low self-esteem. Okay, low self-esteem can express itself in a multitude of ways. Low self-esteem can express itself through narcissism, through pride, through arrogance, through a lack of humility, or what we think of as humility, or it can express itself in, self-hate, self-loathing, and what we call false humility. Because either way, there is no true understanding of biblical humility and what humility is. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that's how some of these young girls turn bad and makes themselves easy to get boys' attention. And that's sad.
I need a Diet Dr. Pepper break. Thanks. Yes, and you're right. It does happen. But here's the point. When we think of humility, humility is not an extreme. Both of these extremes of both girls is two sides of the same coin. Okay, neither are two healthy expressions of humility. Both is a reflection of lack of self-esteem, and both have ultimately become me-centered, I-centered, because I need to get attention. I need to have that affirmation, right?
Remember the talk you had with Lee, maybe 2 or 3 years ago? Because people kept saying, they were saying how smart she was, how pretty she was, how cute she is, she's gorgeous. And you had to set her straight. Remember that? But
I like how you put that. People would say how gorgeous she was, and I had to set her straight.
No, it wasn't that, but she is. But you had to let her know there's more to her than that. But that's all she heard from people.
Yes, and I had to have a talk with her about that because she did hear that a lot. Even within her own family, people trying to encourage, and rightfully so, they're trying to encourage, but we oftentimes get caught up in our culture, and we value those things. So, people wanted to encourage Leah, and they wanted to, to express their
compliment.
Thank you. They wanted to compliment her. But I was very concerned that would go to her head and she would focus on the wrong things, and that she would begin to focus on her external looks instead of what is inside, the eternal soul, the spirit. That's what makes the person. That's what makes you. Okay. And I'm using interchangeably soul and spirit here, but from a Hebrew perspective, they're slightly different, which is a study for another time. But humility. When we think of humility, humility is not the opposite of conceit or pride, nor is humility self-hate. Humility is not an extreme quality in any way, shape, or form. Humility is, and Sarah touched on this earlier when she was talking about balance. Humility is a balanced, moderate, accurate understanding of who you are as a person created in the image of God. Let me say that one more time so we understand. Humility, it is a balanced, moderate, accurate understanding of who you are as a person who is created in the image of God. This is why humility and self-esteem go hand in hand. They have to go hand in hand. If you don't have proper self-esteem and confidence, and humility, your humility will ultimately end up as false humility, because then it truly becomes self-hate, and it truly becomes a desire to want people to look at you. I struggle with that myself. I think we all have to some degree, but I struggle with that myself. And, wanting to be accepted by people. We all want to be accepted by people. We all want to receive a pat on the back. We all want to be told that you're doing a good job. You know what? You're talented, you're gifted, or whatever the case may be. We all want to hear that. So Alan Moranis uses the analogy of the bench, and I'm going to use this analogy because I think it's a good analogy. And he says that he uses the analogy of the bench to express both extremes. Next time you sit on a bench in a park, ask yourself, how much of the bench do you occupy? How much of the bench do you occupy? Do you sit on the edge of the bench, barely on the bench? Maybe one part of your tuchus is hanging off. and you become uncomfortable? Or do you sprawl out on the bench, taking up the entire bench so nobody else can sit down? Humility is like sitting on that bench. Okay, you don't have to cringe on the edge of the bench because you are entitled to sit on the bench comfortably. But at the same time, you are not entitled to take up the entire bench. Okay, you are entitled to your space. Each person, regardless of who we are, each person is created with different personalities, different characteristics, different talents, different purposes in life. God has allotted space for each and every one of us within his created world and his kingdom. When you take up more space than is given you by God, then you have been driven by the Yetzer Hara. That is the evil inclination, or what, is oftentimes thought in a Christian church, the flesh. You have been drawn by the flesh, to the extreme position of arrogance and conceit. When you take up less space than is given to you, you have likewise been driven by the extreme position of self-hate and ultimately inaction. Okay, so let's think of it in terms of the talents and abilities that we have been given by God. We all have been given different talents and abilities. If you try to operate outside of the talents and abilities and the calling that God has called upon you, that's where it becomes arrogance, and that's where it becomes prideful. Okay, when you refuse to operate out of fear or out of self-loathing or self-hate, and who am I? I can't do this. I am nothing. What right do I have to do this? Then you likewise have false humility, and you are just as ineffective, because then you aren't doing anything. You aren't fulfilling the calling that God has given you. So both extremes creates problems. If we want to be the most effective in ministering to the kingdom of God, we have to be within the space that God has allotted for us. We have to operate within the talents and abilities that God has given us and trust. And I have to remind myself of this. So I am not preaching to you. I am trying to listen to what I am saying, because I have to remind myself of this all the time. Okay. And that is that we have to be comfortable and confident where God has us. Okay. Here's another example. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos. Rabbi Zechariah, who thought he showed humility by not acting with presumption. What he actually did was an error on the extreme of being too humble, because he shrank from the task that he had been given. Okay, he shrank from the task that he had been given. A person in a position of authority is in danger of both extremes. In his arrogance, he may act presumptuously with authority that is ultimately not his, and he may abuse others. He may take advantage of others. On the other hand, in his humility or false humility, he may not act at all. And then he ignores his responsibility. And part of that responsibility, ignoring that responsibility, may be to the detriment of others, and other people hurt because we failed to act in the calling that God has given us. Moses was called the most humble man ever expressed too much humility in Exodus 4. This is a perfect example of what I mean by too much humility that calls to inaction. In Exodus chapter 4, beginning in verse 10, it says this. It says, "But Moses said to the Lord, Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and tongue." And then the Lord said to him, "Who has made a man's mouth? Who has made him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what you shall speak." But he said to him, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite?" So here, Moses shrank back from his responsibility because he was overly humble, or what I would call false humility. Okay, he suffered from a lack of self-confidence. He had suffered from lack of self-confidence. Therefore, he would not respond to the call that God has given him until he was forced to do so. At his encounter with God at the burning bush, Moses' humility caused him to shrink back When God had given us authority, when God has given us authority to speak to Pharaoh, we too must go. If God has said, I want you to go and I want you to speak to Pharaoh, we must go. We can't afford to be, in this case, like Moses and shrink back and say, who am I? I don't have, who am I? I don't have the ability to talk. I don't have the ability to speak. I don't know how to do any of this. Okay. I am nothing. Why are you calling me to do this? On the other hand, someone could operate on the spirit of Korah and presumptuously take on the authority that was not his and watch the earth open up and swallow them. Either way, of course, I'd rather be Moses than Korah. But Moses had to have been, had to be told by God pretty harshly to go do what I told you to do. Okay, let me give you another example, another analogy of how the space that we are to take up, we are to take up the space that God has allotted us. But that space is oftentimes situational. Okay, are you following what I'm saying? That space is oftentimes situational. That is not, that space is not necessarily meant to be throughout your life during your, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay, let's think of an example of a police officer. When a police officer is in duty in a public space, the space they occupy is larger than the space that they would occupy at home with their spouse and children, right? The same can be said for a school teacher or a CEO of a large company, a U.S. senator, a rabbi, or a pastor. Okay, the space that we occupy affects our, the situation. The situation that we are in affects the space that we occupy. I am a father, I am a husband, I am a son, a brother, an employee, a teacher. And in each one, and I've been a spiritual leader in the past, and each one of those has a different aspect of authority. Each one of those, I operate in a different space, okay? And I have to recognize the authority that I've been given or authority I haven't been given. All of these positions occupy different amounts of space depending on the situation. An example of how fluid our occupied space is and the need to recognize the space of others, okay? To recognize the space of others. That, like I said, it's like that analogy of the bench, right? To recognize that, yes, I have a right to sit on this bench, but I don't have the right to take up the whole bench. And that the authority that I have been given or the space that I occupy at that moment can change, and it's situational. And I'm going to give you an analogy here. The space of others and the sole trait of silence. We're going to talk in more detail about silence a little bit later in this Mussar study program. But humility and silence are oftentimes tied together. Okay, they oftentimes go together. Humility and the sole trait of silence is linked. Speech is viewed by the rabbis as one of the greatest gifts of God, right? It is one of the key ways that we are separated from the rest of creation in our ability to communicate. One of the ways I think we're made in the image of God is our ability to speak and our ability to create with our voice. God spoke the universe into existence. And so it is, that we have the ability to speak and to create with our voice. Like any gift, we are given responsibilities to use that gift in a way that is honoring to God. It is important to know how to use it. This also includes not only how to use it, but it includes when not to use it. This is a big one, okay? Talking too much can be a sign of taking up too much space. Talking too much can be a sign of taking up too much space. Is the person you're speaking to asking for your advice? Do they just want somebody to talk to? Do they need an ear to listen to? Or, or you just, or did they ask for your advice? Are you speaking because you have presumptuously taken on that space that is not yours? Are you giving them counsel because you feel that your words are important enough that they should listen to what you have to say? Do you feel the need to take up this space? Do you feel the need to give people advice? Maybe we give too much weight to our own words. It takes humility to recognize the need to listen to other people. Like I said, one of the most healing things that I've ever had is the ability to have my story told. Okay. I went to counseling for a year and a half dealing with anxiety, and just to be able to have somebody to talk to and to hear my story was incredibly healing. Okay. And oftentimes it wasn't the counselor telling me A, B, or C. It was just listening. He was just there listening to what I was saying.
Well, sometimes you need an ear to talk to that's not going to criticize you or bring up stuff that.
Or in some cases, even give you advice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just need to tell your story and you need somebody to listen. So we have to ask ourselves that question. You know, do I feel the need to constantly talk into a situation, or can I listen? Do I have enough spirit of humility where I can listen to what other people are saying? Can I be an ear to somebody who is hurting? It takes humility to recognize this. Not everybody needs your advice. Sometimes they just need to listen. Sometimes the space you are to occupy is silence. Sometimes that is one of the greatest expressions of humility, is silence. When ministering to a house of mourning in a Jewish community, when somebody has died within the community, it is customary not to speak to a community member who's lost a loved one until they at the mourning party, until they have spoken to you. Even then, the speaking is to remain at a minimum, and that is to a part of that is to encourage the mourner to talk and to heal, and for you to listen, not give advice, not give counsel, not talk, but to listen. It is in this we recognize that the space is theirs. You know, when we gather together and we listen to a mourner, somebody who has lost a loved one, we recognize that the space is theirs. We show honor and respect to others by recognizing their space and being an ear to listen to them. When someone needs to draw attention to themselves in a house of mourning, it is a sure sign of narcissism, needing that attention on myself. Okay, I have seen it, I've witnessed that even in a house of mourning where somebody had the need to take all the attention away from the mourner and put all the attention on themselves. And even this, the root cause is a lack of self-esteem because they need the attention focused on themselves. If there is a definition of humility, I'm going to give you a third one, which I think ultimately is the best definition. I appreciate this definition probably even more than the others. And this is from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. He says this: false humility is a pretense that one is small. True humility is the consciousness of standing in the presence of greatness. So listen to that one more time. False humility is the pretense that one is small. True humility is the consciousness of standing in the presence of greatness. Humility is the capacity to admire, to be open to something that is greater than yourself. Okay, and I'm going to use this as an example. I remember this was a few years ago. I'm a fan of Dennis Prager. I love listening to Dennis Prager's radio program. I have some of his books. Just an incredibly wise, spiritually wise Jewish man. Okay, and I had a chance to hear him speaking at work one day. I had a chance to shake his hand and speak to him at work. He's a big man. You know, I'm a pretty good sized guy, and Dennis Prager kind of towered over me a little bit. He was a good 3 inches taller than I am, and I'm 6'2", so he was a pretty big man. But more than physically big, spiritually, he was a big man. You know, politically, he's a big man. Culturally, he is a big man. And it was overwhelming to be able to stand there and to see him, you know, and to shake his hand was overwhelming, because you recognize that, man, this guy is really talented. This guy is really gifted, you know, and you, in a way, you kind of felt like you were standing in the presence of greatness.
Wasn't that many years ago?
That was a few years ago, yeah.
So I remember being there.
Yep. as I left that, as I left that event that day, it occurred to me that I was standing in the presence of somebody who was extremely talented and gifted, and God had called him to an awesome task. This is why the prophets are often, and I'm not comparing, Dennis Prager to God, don't misunderstand me. But this is why the prophets are oftentimes humbled when they enter into the presence of God, because they're overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed with the presence of God, and they're humbled. And so it is even in our lives. It's oftentimes easy to be humble when you're standing in the presence of a king or a queen or a president of the United States, or somebody who's a great spiritual leader or something like that. And if we're humbled in the presence of somebody like that, how much more so in the presence of God himself? And I would say, of course, that those who had eyes to hear, eyes to see and ears to hear, when they saw Yeshua, they were overwhelmed with humility. They were overwhelmed with the greatness unlike the world has ever seen. So what I want to do for this week, I want to encourage us. I want to encourage us to practice the art of humility by doing this one thing. Just doing this one thing. And that is stop and listen to what somebody has to say. Stop and listen to what they're, be an ear for somebody who needs to talk, and practice humility by being able to step back and just listen to what they have to say. So this is my challenge for the week as part of your Mussar, is to just stop and listen and be an ear for somebody who's struggling right now. In closing, I want to close with these few words here. A few descriptions of being humble, what it means to be humble. The humble are overwhelmed with a sense of their own spiritual inadequacy and their own spiritual need. The humble are compassionate, and they can forgive much because they know how much they have been forgiven. The humble are willing to yield the right to be right. Boy, that's a powerful one when you think about that, right? The humble are willing to yield the right to be right. The humble are motivated to serve others. The humble desire to promote and encourage and uplift others. The humble rejoice when others are lifted up. The humble are humbled by how very much they have to learn. The humble recognize that I don't know all the answers, and I'm still being taught, and God is still teaching me, and I have a lot to learn. The humble accept personal responsibility and can see where they are wrong in a situation. The humble receive criticism, critique, correction with an open spirit. The humble are willing to be open and transparent with others as God directs. The humble are quick to admit failure and to seek forgiveness when it is necessary. The humble are concerned about the consequences of their sin. And then finally, the humble take the initiative to be reconciled when there is misunderstanding or conflict in personal relationships. I think these are all accurate descriptions of biblical definition of humility, what it means to be humble. So again, let me encourage you for this coming week to think about these things, to think about some of these aspects of humility, and then to just ask that question, how can I listen? How can I listen to somebody this week? Am I dominating a conversation, or am I able to step back and listen to what people have to say? Take that initiative to listen, because I think that, when we fight back the urge to want to talk and to give our advice or to give our counsel, we're going to find out how much we struggle with that, and how we need to maybe take a step back and learn the art of listening.
And a lot of people don't want to hear it anyhow. They're not going to listen to you if you tell them.
No.
They're going to resent you putting your 2 cents worth in.
And I'm certainly not saying that when somebody comes and they truly need advice and they truly need counsel and they come to us because we're dependable, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But to recognize when somebody just needs to talk, to recognize when somebody needs their story told, and to be able to listen. So that is my homework for you guys this week. All right, it should be an easy one. Have fun. Ray, do you have any thoughts or questions? I think your mic's on mute.
There we go. I said,
Okay,
yes, I
good.
do. Yes, I do.
Yes.
Like, you can't go by the country song. It's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way.
That's a country song?
That's a country song.
That sounds like a country song. That sounds like a country song.
What's the song? I'll tell you if it's country.
Ray will tell you. What was the name of the song again?
It's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way.
No, that's a dreamer sign. That's a dreamer song
That's definitely a country song.
by a dreamer.
I like it though. That's creative. I like that. Awesome. You have any other thoughts?
Oh, with
or
that,
questions?
you have a great week.
You too, as well, my friend.
When you start talking that way.
Get snowed in.
Yes, be safe. Y'all be safe this weekend.
You too.
Um,
Yeah, we're gonna do our shopping tomorrow.
Yeah, we're
morning.
gonna try to do some shopping tomorrow sometime as well. It might be
Good
after
luck.
work, but
Good luck.
we'll try to get our shopping done because we may be here for a few days. We'll see.
The stores are
Yeah.
We'll
packed.
see how it goes and how accurate the weathermen are. We
Yeah,
can
you
get.
listen to one channel, they say one thing, another channel says something else.
Yep, you betcha.
All right, you have a great week.
You too, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
I got hot dogs today